Since the official inception of the MCU over 15 years ago with Iron Man, we have been blessed with some truly iconic movie heroes, but what is a hero without a villain? And what is a Hot Toys display without some baddies to accompany our favorite characters? That's right, today we're going to be tackling my top 10 Hot Toys villains from the MCU. Well, hello again, everyone, and welcome back to the channel. As I said, today we're diving back into another top 10, and this time we're looking at the best bad guys in figure form from the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And as you can see, I have the shirt to prove it. But as always, before we get into that, please double check to make sure that you are subscribed to the channel. Don't be a villain yourself and leave me hanging either. Go ahead and give me a presumptive like on this video and take your place in the Hall of Heroes. Now, this topic specifically was requested by quite a few people, so I thought, why not? Let's give the people what they want. So that's what I'm going to do here today. But let's lay this all out there. It's been 15 years and 30 plus films later, which in itself, regardless of the reception on some of these, is absolutely insane. Respect. And naturally, within those 30 plus films and assorted TV shows, there have been some truly legendary bad guys, but just because they were awesome on screen, or maybe they were terrible on screen, that doesn't make it a great figure. No, this is a video about figures after all. How well did they translate to figure form, and from that, which are the best of the best? Or it is villains, so should it be the worst of the worst? Oh well, I digress. Now, there have been some pretty darn good third-party baddies out there as well. The Toys Era Fiend, the Toys Era Black Order, and Susu Toys Boss Man, just to name a few, but we're going to be sticking strictly to Hot Toys. So now, as we dive into this, we're going to start at number 10, and crazy enough, it's from the first film of the MCU. It's Ironmonger from Iron Man. Now honestly, I would have taken Jeff Bridges as Obadiah Stane as a figure himself, because I felt that he was a pretty darn dastardly villain in that first Iron Man film, but add a gigantic mech suit around him and offer it in figure form, now we are talking. This figure overall is a beast, and as you can see, takes up quite a bit of room, but after all, it is the Ironmonger. Now, before, people have called for this figure to be reissued and die-cast, but honestly, I just don't see it. It's just too big to warrant that type of treatment. It would just be way too heavy for the average display, and I'm more than satisfied with this plastic version. The paint apps and weathering are actually pretty impressive, and in addition to the incredible silhouette of this mechanical monster, it does open up to show the Jeff Bridges head sculpt in minibust, which I think is a really nice touch, and actually very well done. The big negative for this figure, and what bothers some people, is that it actually is plastic, which means it is susceptible to breaking. But if you're willing to handle this figure with caution, you have an exceptional villain to add to your shelf, and if you can find him for a pretty good price, I think it's definitely worth the pickup. Now, speaking of reissues, this next figure is one that people have been clamoring to be reissued, and that is the Winter Soldier himself from Captain America, the Winter Soldier. Of all the Bucky Barnes figures out there that have been released to date, I still think that this is my favorite, even more so than the Civil War version. And the reasoning behind that, for me, is definitely the two head sculpts that it provides, which I think are absolutely spectacular, especially for the age. If I were to have a preference, I think it's going to be the eye-blacked version, as you can see, opposed to the face masks, because I like being able to see the full sculpt. The proportions on this figure are actually pretty excellent, and the metal arm is the bright and shiny color, which I do prefer to the black version that he gets later on in Infinity War. He comes with loads of accessories and weapons and pairs so nice with Captain America. Now, there are a couple of negatives, and of course, starting off, it's going to be the metal arm, which is single jointed, which is a big miss and a shame. But the biggest thing going against this figure, unfortunately, is its age, which also means that material quality is pretty subpar. And although mine is held together pretty well, I do know plenty of collectors that have had theirs to start to flake and fall apart, unfortunately. And I know there are some replacement third-party outfits out there for sale, and I'm actually considering some because I really do love this figure, and I'm not entirely sure that they will ever revisit it for a reissue. But if they do, and if they are, I would 100% be in line for another one. Coming in at number 8 is Eric Killmonger from the first Black Panther movie. There's no denying that the cultural impact that this movie had when it first came out and the ripples of that film's success are still seen today. In my opinion, what made that movie so good was not only Chadwick's incredible performance, but also because they had a really good villain, that's right, that you could relate with, and that was Eric Killmonger. This figure also doesn't really disappoint either, and you get all the aspects of that Golden Jaguar in figure format. The proportions on this figure are excellent, and you can tell that the underbody is a bit beefier and a different body type, which I actually love. And while the suit is incredible, has great colors and markings, and is surprisingly posable, for me, what makes this figure great is the Michael B. Jordan head sculpt, and that is the toughest decision that you're going to need to make. When posing this figure, do you want to include the head or the mask? Now, I don't know if you can make a wrong choice with it either way, but there's just something special about seeing an unmasked head sculpt with a hot toy because it just adds that extra layer of realism. But if you do want to opt for the mask, you cannot deny just how well done the sculpting on the mask and the paint apps actually are. It's an absolutely solid figure and an excellent compliment to add next to the Black Panther himself. Now, next on this list is going to be a little bit of a controversial one, and that is the Doc Ock figure from No Way Home. Now, right out of the gate, I know that the biggest issue with this release was the head sculpt itself. People just didn't like it, and I agree, it's not that great, and it's very difficult to photograph, as you can see. However, and no, I'm not shilling for anyone, in hand, it actually is not as bad as people make it out to be, I promise. And under the right lighting and angles, it actually looks pretty decent, but if you can make your way past the head sculpt and onto the rest of the figure, you'll see a truly unique work of Hot Toys ingenuity. The mechanical legs on this figure are absolutely phenomenal, and the true highlight of the figure itself. I'm not for sure what I actually prefer more, the posability of those legs, their functionality, or maybe even the paint apps, because if you happen to get the deluxe version that came with the alternate tentacles that have the Stark Tech, all the red on there, you really have something special because the red really does pop. I know that No Way Home was a special film for a lot of people who grew up with Sam Raimi and that Spider-Man, and of course its villains, so to have a figure from those films is a definite thing that some people are wanting, and I recommend not to miss. I own both the Toys era and the Hot Toys version of the Doc Ock, and I can say hands down, the Hot Toys version is light years better than the Toys era version, including the head sculpt. Most likely, this is going to be your only chance to get an Alfred Molina Doc Ock figure to add to your collection, so don't miss out on this classic piece of nostalgia and overall engineering superiority from Hot Toys. Jumping over to our next figure, but from the same line of figures, that being No Way Home. There is no controversy about this sculpt. That figure is the Green Goblin. Now, like Doc, I have the Toys era version to compare it to, and once again, I can say safely that the Hot Toys version is superior in every way, except for the posability, but I'll talk about that in just a second. The proportions on this figure, not just in the body, but in the helmet itself, is so much more screen accurate, even down to the metal teeth on the mask, and like Killmonger, the figure before we just mentioned, you have to decide because the sculpt is so good with that Willem Dafoe head sculpt, do you really want to hide it under the mask? Decisions, a tough call for sure. I love that this figure does have the rolling eyeball system, and that can give you even crazier looks for old Norman Osborn. But as great as this figure looks standing, it does have some limitations, and that is an issue because this figure deserves to be posed dynamically, especially when on the glider. Where Toys era exceeds expectations is its posability and the materials used. Hot Toys for some reason went with a more conservative approach to give them more screen accurate look, sure, but I suppose that suffered some functionality. Thankfully, they did add Velcro pieces of the armor, so you can remove it and put the Green Goblin in better poses and apply the armor pieces later on, but the full range of motion is still lacking quite a bit, in my opinion, and is quite susceptible to tears in the fabric, so I've seen. Here's hoping that the upgraded Goblin from the end of the film will be a better final product. Okay, for this one, I'm going to call a little bit of an audible because I'm going to mod a certain figure. Next up on the list is everyone's favorite god of mischief, Loki. So why wouldn't we add a little bit of mischief to this slot on the list? The in-game release of Loki was quite controversial from the neck up. There's no denying that the outfit and the tailoring were spot on, but what people didn't like was that head sculpt. So, if the head sculpt is bad or somewhat subpar, let's do something about it, shall we? By simply popping on the President Loki sculpt, you've completely upgraded the look of the Avengers Endgame Loki, and I think catapults him into the top 5. This essentially was a reissue of the first Avengers Loki, but with upgraded features across the board. I love the handcuffs, I love the Tesseract, the mouthpiece, the tailoring, the staffs. Everything looked great, except for that head sculpt, until now. If you have this Loki, and you're wanting a little bit of an upgrade, see if you can find the President Loki sculpt available on eBay or other sites online. I promise you, it is worth the upgrade, and you'll be happy that you did. Next up is him. That's right, it is the guy who beat the Avengers. No, literally beat the Avengers. That's right, Thanos from Infinity War. Maybe it's his size, maybe it was his price back in the day, but this is a figure that I marvel at why he is not in more people's collections. This figure is literally so freaking cool. He comes with 2 head sculpts that I think are 2 of the Hot Toys' best. The smirk is just so smug, and I love it. What I also love about this figure is that it does come with a power pose arm attachment that allows you to get him in a dynamic pose without compromising the integrity of the arm itself. This is a huge win that I wish Hot Toys could do more of when it comes to arms on seamless figures to avoid that terrible issue of breaks and creases. What I also love about this figure is the simplicity in the character design, which isn't necessarily Hot Toys' choice, but rather Marvel's. As I said, this is the version of Thanos that beat the Avengers and snapped half of the universe out of existence. To me, it is ironic that this warlord would be down in his pajamas, essentially, when he gets that epic W. He doesn't come with a lot, but he doesn't need a whole lot. His presence itself is all you need, and if you have a Marvel display and you are needing a Thanos, then what are you waiting for? This is the one to get. Now the bronze medal is truly no mystery. It's Mysterio from Spider-Man Far From Home. Now, this is a figure that I just, once again, don't understand why it is not higher up on people's favorite figures list. It is absolutely exceptional in every single way. From the colors on the helmet and the suit itself, to the tailoring, to the additional Jake Gyllenhaal head sculpt, the magic effects, and even some UV paint if you happen to have a black light. It is also surprisingly posable and really commands a presence on your shelf. Also, if you happen to have that Molten Man base, it just takes the figure into an absolutely top-tier shelf. I believe the biggest complaint for a lot of collectors was the unsightly seam on the fishbowl helmet, but for me, it was just not that big of a deal, especially depending on where you have him in your display. It's pretty much unnoticeable. Yeah, it is a little bit of a challenge to swap the helmet off with the actual head sculpt, but it's not a deal breaker for me. I truly don't have anything negative to say, and I tried to be as analytical about this one as I could, but it's just a win after win on the board for Mysterio. If you have an opportunity to add this figure to your collection, pair him up with some drones, or the Illusion Iron Man, or Spider-Man himself, you got yourself a really nice display piece. And now, the silver medal and runner-up as the best MCU villain that Hot Toys has done is none other than my favorite symbiote. That's right, Venom. And I can hear it now. You may be screaming at the screen saying, Venom isn't part of the MCU! Well, my dear friend, with the post-credits scenes, Let There Be Carnage, showing Tom Holland's Spider-Man, and Morbius having Michael Keaton's Vulture, I think they're now fair game. With that being said, this figure has remained near the very top of my collection since the day it was released, and I've not been shy in saying that Venom is my favorite comic book character of all time. And for me, his entry and depiction into the Sony movies as the Lethal Protector is very well done. Is he comic accurate? No. I know that he is missing the big spider, and I know as well, to some, that has been a huge deal breaker. Thankfully, the new Monster Venom coming will hopefully scratch that itch. But what about this figure, you may ask? To me, it gives you that hulking symbiote monster that everyone has come to love, and although it doesn't have the Spider-Man on its chest, it is undeniably Venom. What makes this figure so good to me are the magnetic face sculpts that you can have, as well as the different expressions through the tongues. To be so big, it actually is surprisingly posable, and the texture is like a sticky, gooey substance as you would come to expect from a symbiote. And yes, while all those things are great, it was the addition of the half Eddie Brock sculpt from the deluxe Carnage figure that really put this figure into another stratosphere. So now you have 3 incredible sculpts to display on this version of Venom, which I think is pretty darn cool. And with that being said, it's time to name the top figure in my collection on the MCU villain side. And yes, I'm going to be stealing from Sony once again. That's right, it's Carnage. Say what you want about the film itself and the portrayal of Carnage, but there is no denying just how incredible this figure itself actually is. Take everything that I said and love about the previous Venom figure that I mentioned and amplify it, and that's what you get with this Carnage. When it comes to the size, he's bigger than Venom at a whopping 17 inches. When it comes to the head sculpts, he comes with two incredible expressions, but this time, with the magnetic tongues, there is no metal piece that sits in the back of the mouth that is visible like on the Venom figure. You need accessories? Carnage comes with trays and trays of tendrils and weapons to add to your posing options. And remember how I said that I like the feel of the Venom figure? Well, this one feels even crazier and surprisingly more durable than the previous Venom figure. So once again, that is a plus in my book. So if there has to be a negative, the only thing, and I mean the only thing you could say, is that it does have exposed joints. But depending on how you pose him, it is not a problem at all, at least for me. There is just not a better villain that can fill up a shelf quite like this Carnage. So take your throne at the top, Cletus. That evil pedestal is yours. You've earned it. Well, there you have it. The top 10 best Hot Toys figures from the MCU. With a little bit of Sony mixed in there. How did I do? Was I way off? Did I add someone you hate? Did I forget someone that you may love? Let me know down below. And now it's your turn to let me know who is your favorite comic book villain of all time. Let me know down below. And of course, if you like this type of content and want to see more of it, well, let me know that too. And as always, you'll never see more if you aren't subscribed. So go ahead. What are you waiting for? Click do the thing and make sure that you are subscribed to the channel. Happy collecting, thanks for watching, and I'll be seeing you in our next video.